again for joining us today. And now I'd like to introduce Catherine Hunter, Interim Director of the Office of Child and Family Services at the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Service. Welcome, Catherine.
Thanks, Liz. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back for day 2. Like Liz said, I'm Catherine Hunter, and I'm the Acting Director of the Office of Child and Family Services. We hope you found day 1 of the symposium both informative and engaging. Today, we will continue our exploration of innovative approaches, evidence-based interventions, and supportive strategies to empower professionals with the tools and strategies needed to serve adolescents and young adults on their journey towards wellness. Together, we will delve into the latest research, share best practices, and engage in meaningful discussions to foster a deeper understanding of substance use among this vulnerable population. We look forward to embarking on day 2 of the symposium with you. And with that, I will turn it over to Kim Boyd to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you're back with us today. My name is Kim Boyd, and I serve as the Adolescent and Young Adult Substance Use Coordinator within the Office of Child and Family Services. I'm fairly new to the role, so I'm looking forward to getting to know everyone and working with you. So today, I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker. So on December 13th, 2008, Tony Hoffman was paroled by the California Department of Corrections after serving a 2-year sentence for a drug-related robbery. While incarcerated, Tony set 4 goals: race BMX professionally, go to the Olympics, start a nonprofit called the Free Will Project, and become a professional mental health and substance abuse speaker. During his senior year at Clovis High School, he was featured on the cover of BMXer magazine and was sponsored by Fox Racing, Spy sunglasses, and Airwalk shoes. On the surface, Tony's path seemed destined for stardom. However, in reality, Tony experienced crippling anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideations. Tony's substance use began during his senior year, leading to the deterioration of his mental health, and opioid addiction soon followed. Due to his misuse of Oxycontin and other drugs, a life of addiction, crime, homelessness, and incarceration became his reality. Since paroling prison, Tony has tirelessly worked toward achieving his goals and the dreams he had set out for while incarcerated. He raced BMX professionally for several years and continued to coach Brooks Crane to a 4th place finish at the Rio Olympic Games. Accomplishing his dream of going to the Olympics, the Free Will Project was very successful for many years, helping thousands of youth through action sports, before moving on to pursuing a very demanding national speaking career. Today, Tony is an author and owner of PH Wellness Drug and Alcohol Treatment Facility and one of the world's most requested mental health and substance use speakers. So welcome, Tony. We are glad you are with us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the opportunity to share my knowledge, share my life story, and my experiences. I am now finishing up my 14th year as a speaker, and I can happily say that I am reaching the end of the road of doing this 250 days a year. When I first started doing this, I knew I had some visions of what I wanted to do with my speaking, but I didn't quite know where it was going to go and what it was going to develop into. And then all of a sudden you're 40 years old and you realize I don't have a family, I don't have kids, and I don't really have a life because Monday through Friday I'm on a plane, and I wouldn't change it for anything. But I do say that I am reaching the end of me speaking as much as I am, because I think I would like to have a family, and I would like to focus on intimately working with individuals that are now at my treatment center, and focus on developing a treatment center that becomes a national brand. And so when I first started speaking, it really was just about me standing in front of young kids, telling kids my stories, and then trying to stop them from making some of the decisions that I had made when I was their age, without telling them what to do with their life. I just wanted to share my experiences, and then hopefully they could reflect on my experiences and then not make some of the choices that I made. And then in 2018, I had an opportunity to give a TED Talk. That TED Talk is now one of the biggest TED Talks in the world in the addiction space. And shortly after that TED Talk, I had this huge breakthrough in therapy. I had been in therapy for 8 years at this time, still diving into some of the deeper mechanics of why I was the way I was. And this huge breakthrough really shifted why I was holding a microphone, why I was standing in front of audiences, and just exactly what I was trying to convey while I was speaking. And that is ultimately what I'm here to do today, is to take this breakthrough that I had in therapy and bring to you through my life story what this experience I had with my therapist helped me understand about myself, which in turn helped me understand more about other individuals, specifically young people, because this breakthrough that I had nothing to do with my adulthood. It had nothing to do with the current moment that I was in. It had everything to do with the how and why this whole thing started and went the direction that it went. And so today, I hope you feel inspired in the work that you do. And I hope that something that I say today shifts your understanding and it grows your perspective on how we can be more effective working with young people. Because as we know, working with young people today is a very challenging thing with all of the challenges that they face with all of the stuff that's coming at them with life. I grew up in the middle of California. I tell people there's no beaches in the California I grew up in. 30% of the world's produce comes from a 200-mile radius around my house. I'm come from the ag capital of the world. My parents moved to this place called Fresno County when I was young for work, and then relocated us to a city nearby called Clovis. Clovis Unified at that time was one of the top public schools in the United States. And my parents wanted me to move there, or wanted to move us there so me and my brother could get a good education. Well, when I moved to Clovis and I started getting involved in the schools, I found out that Clovis Unified was not just known for their academics, they were actually more known for their sports programs. We had back-to-back national baseball champions at Clovis High School. All the United States best wrestlers come from Clovis North and Buchanan High School every single year. We have football players. Josh Allen is the quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. Both of the Carr brothers came from my backyard. So we have all of these athletes that come out of Clovis because of our sports programs. So being a Clovis kid, I got involved in sports. Then I found out that I was a naturally gifted athlete. It didn't matter what the sport that I played was: basketball, baseball, soccer, rollerblades, skateboards, BMX bikes, volleyball, tennis. I was a naturally gifted athlete that was always the best player on my team. But my first dream was to go to the NBA. I was a short white kid from the middle of California telling my dad I was going to graduate from the University of Michigan. After I graduated from the University of Michigan, I told my dad I was going to get drafted to the league. By the time I got to sixth grade, the high school and middle school coaches were coming to watch me run point guard. It was really clear by the time that I got to sixth grade that the short white kid from the middle of California could play basketball. But when I got to seventh grade, some things changed. Some things changed when I got to seventh grade, and it was changing in places that people couldn't see. When I got to middle school, I started to have this overwhelming feeling and thought that I needed to kill myself. And I didn't understand where it was coming from. The only thing that I knew is that when I got to campus, I felt really uncomfortable with myself. I'd try to stop myself from feeling uncomfortable, but the more I tried to stop myself from feeling uncomfortable, it just kept coming back. And the more it kept coming back, the more I started to think to myself, there's something wrong with you. And the reason that I thought something was wrong with me is because society and institutions weren't built on vulnerability at this time, which meant I wasn't allowed to come to school and sit down in a safe space or connect with a community of people and talk about what it was like to be Tony. I wasn't allowed to share these experiences that I was having in the places that people couldn't see. If I was being encouraged to have these conversations about these real matters that each and every one of us feel to some degree, then I would have been able to connect with my peers and see that what I was experiencing actually wasn't all that different than some of the peers that I was going to school with. But the way it was set up back then is that you went to church on Sundays and you told everybody how good God was and how blessed you were. And you went to school and you didn't talk about anything that was happening in the house, because if you talked about those experiences or what it was like to be you, the person that you sat down next to would judge you, make you feel shame, and then you would feel guilty about this experience that you now believed was something that nobody else was having and that you weren't supposed to have it in the first place. Well, it was really no different for me because I was keeping this experience to myself, not realizing that there were many people that I was going to school with that were having similar experiences. One of the things that I didn't know at this time was I had social anxiety. So one of the reasons I came to school and felt really uncomfortable around big groups of people, or one of the reasons that I never exchanged my phone number or hugged the girls, was because I had social anxiety. I wasn't hanging out with the big groups of guys because I had social anxiety. It took me 20 years. I sat down in front of a therapist who then was able to tell me, Tony, you had social anxiety. The reason that you're uncomfortable in big groups of people in that type of setting is because you have social anxiety. That social anxiety was overwhelming for you. And that's why you started to isolate away from individuals, because the isolation removed my anxiety. It removed the discomfort. That was always the goal for me, not knowing it at that time as a young person, that I was just trying to remove myself from discomfort. The social anxiety led me to isolation, which really was the opposite of what we're all supposed to be doing as human beings. It doesn't matter whether you're young or whether you're old. We're supposed to be connected. When we have a connection to community through vulnerability, what we experience is intimacy. That intimacy is where true connection and power come from. And when you have that true power and connection, you now have a real community, and that real community represents strength and hope. It's so important for each one of us as leaders, as adults, to make sure that we're creating communities for young people that are built on vulnerability. Because what we're really trying to get young people to experience is that intimate connection between other human beings that spark this feeling of strength and hope within themselves, because that's what's going to power a young person's decisions, not what we tell them how they're supposed to do it, but how we make them feel in that connection through the community that we have. Well, at 12 years old, I started isolating away from people because I didn't understand myself and I felt different. When I started isolating away from individuals, what I didn't know was going to happen was depression was going to start. I was going to start lowering my brain frequency if we take it down to a neurological level. And when I started to lower that brain frequency, that was when the self-hatred started. The self-hatred was, I hate that I'm like this. The self-hatred is, why can't I be like everybody that's watching me speak right now? The self-hatred is, I hate what my family does. I hate what my family's like. Why can't I be like more like my friends' families? And then there was this experience that I was having with my father. Before these basketball games would start, I'd be sitting down in the seats next to all my teammates. And as I'm sitting in these seats, I'm looking to the end of the gym doors. As I'm looking to the end of the gym doors, I'm having a conversation with myself about this experience I'm having with my father. I look to the end of the gym doors and I would say, come on, Dad. Come on, Dad. You promised me. You told me you were going to get off of work this time. At 12 years old, I didn't understand why when I sat down in this seat next to these young men that would become district champions, recognized up and down the state of California for how good we were at playing basketball. Why, when I looked to the end of the gym doors, Jason's mom and dad came to every single game. Jeff's mom made it to every single game. Richie's mom and dad made it to every single game. Brent's dad not only came to the games, this dude's dad came to every single practice. And I started thinking to myself, what's wrong with you? You already feel broken, but what's wrong with you that your hero, your father, can't show up and just watch you play basketball? I didn't care about anybody watching me play. Not my teammates, not my coach, not my families, my teammates' families, my father. My father was the only person I cared to see come through those doors to watch me play basketball. What I didn't know I was going through at this time in my life is something that every person in the world goes through. And that's a moment between about the ages of 8 and 15 years old. We create a belief system about ourselves. And there's only two types of belief systems. I can, I will, and I'm able. Or I can't, I won't, and I'm not able. And I can't, I won't, I'm not able is not true for any human being in the world. But you can subconsciously choose this for yourself based on the environment and the experiences that you're having in your environment and how you feel about those experiences with the conversation that you connect to it. See, what I didn't realize is that while I was having this experience of this abandonment from my father that wasn't intentional, I was having these feelings of more anxiety, more fear, more of this feeling of abandonment and feeling like I was inadequate. While I was having these feelings that were really real about this experience that was happening, what was really happening was the conversation about why what was happening was happening. I had no idea at this time that what I was going to do was create a story about this very real experience that was farther from reality than I actually thought. One of the things that I've gotten to do is listen to these really cool doctors at some of these conferences. And I got to listen to a Dr. Judith from Bucknell University, and she confirmed what I had already been speaking about for years. And one of the things she said that is before the prefrontal cortex is actually developed in a human's mind, most of the decisions that we make up until about 21 years old are based on feelings. They have nothing to do with actual logic. You're not thinking about a decision, all the consequences that can come with it, and where those decisions might take you. What you're doing is actually what you're supposed to do, and that's make decisions based on how you feel. Think about a young person when it's born. It opens its eyes and it starts moving, and we start to hold this little infant. And what does it do? It takes the glasses off and wants to hold it and look at it. If you're wearing a hoodie, it pulls on the strings. Anything that it can touch, feel, and see, it is trying to do because that's what the brain wants it to do. It wants it to impulsively make decisions by touching, feeling, and seeing everything. And the brain is going to transmit what is good and what is bad. And the environment will then create parameters for this young brain on how it should do things, what it should do, and what it shouldn't do. If we think about a really young kid who starts to walk, every single one of us have seen the 2-year-old who's gotten up on their feet, grabbed a pen, and looked straight at the electrical socket. And something in their brain says, I need to go to that electrical socket right now and put this in there because this seems like a really good spot to put it. And every single adult gasps, gets up, runs, and tries to stop it from putting this pin inside that electrical socket. Because we know that there's pain in the inside that electrical socket. But what if the human is actually supposed to go and put this inside the electrical socket so that experience can then transmit to the brain that don't ever do that again because it hurts? Well, we create parameters around the behavior of this young person. One of the things that I didn't have at this time was the parameters how to navigate the world that was unseen. That was, how do I navigate anxiety? How do I navigate rejection when I feel rejected? How do I navigate inadequacy when I feel inadequate? How do I navigate depression when I feel sad and don't want to get out of bed? One of the things that we're trying to do as adults that are working with youth is create parameters in these young people's lives. Because as young people, they're supposed to go out still, even when we work with them in their teens, touch, feel, and see everything. But the most important piece of the parameters that we can give them are the skills to navigate the world that can't be seen, because that's where all of the questions within themselves start to reside. Why do I feel this way? Why do I think that I'm different? Why does that person not like me? How am I supposed to dress? Why am I supposed to do this on social media? Is to help them navigate this internal life, because it was when I didn't understand the internal self that my decisions outwardly became more impulsive, not realizing that what I was trying to do was create a world where I touched something, felt something, or did something concerning people, places, and things that gave my brain a spike and a good feeling, which I would think at that time was actually a connection. And so if young kids are supposed to go around, touch, feel, and see everything, then how do we take a young person who has converted their behavior from what we would like to see them doing to something where we have to sit them down and try and re-navigate their lives? At 12 years old, I had no idea that I was going to create a belief system for myself that I can't, I won't, and I'm not able. And once you believe that about yourself, you have to go into the world and confirm it through your behaviors. Like when I was a young kid, they said, stay away from kids who smoke weed and drink. They're bad kids. Bad kids do bad things and influence good kids to do bad things. But I think everyone in here knows that now that that's not actually true. In 2018, I was about to give a keynote speech at a national conference on addiction and mental health. There was a brochure with a bunch of statistics on it that they gave me. And I started reading all of these statistics. And one of the statistics stuck out to me because it was about young people specifically. It said 68% of kids use nicotine products. That's vaping, cigarettes, drink alcohol, smoke marijuana, use any other type of mind or mood altering substance. If they start before the age of 14, 68% of them have been sexually abused. Almost a guarantee. If somebody ends up at my rehab facility and I sit them down and we start to dissect their story and I ask them when they started, if they tell me before the age of 14 that they had been the victim of sexual abuse. And the reason that this is important is because if young kids are supposed to make decisions based on how they feel, then when we end up working with the individuals that we're working with, what we already know, hopefully, is that everything their environment is making them feel, whether it's an infliction of some type of trauma or crime that shouldn't be done to them, or it's what they're seeing their mother and father do, or maybe it's not even seeing a parent, but seeing this chaoticness or access to gangs, the environment is making them feel shame, guilt, anxiety, and it's normalized because they see it every day, so they don't even know that what they're experiencing is actually happening. And they're supposed to touch, feel, and see everything, and then they find the substance, the vape pen, the joint, the bottle of alcohol. And what if the environment they were in actually made them feel like their finger was stuck in an electrical socket? Every single day, the finger is stuck in an electrical socket, riddled with anxiety, filled with guilt, confusion, rejection, abandonment, the fear that this thing is going to keep happening at the same time by the same person. And then this makes them feel completely different. Makes them feel good. Makes them feel like temporarily they have escaped finger being stuck in the socket. I always say, when I look back on my middle school years, knowing now that 68, 70% of the kids that we kicked out of school were actually victims of sexual abuse, that were using substances, how terribly wrong we were. Because those individuals felt like their finger was stuck in an electrical socket. They were growing up in an environment that was not providing them the parameters or the skill set to navigate life, especially from the unseen world. Somebody in their family showed them, or somebody in their environment showed them a substance that provided them relief, doing what they should be doing as a human being, making decisions, touch, feeling, and seeing everything, and waiting for the brain to tell them whether something was good or bad. They found a substance that provided them relief. They showed up to school, and we said, when we kicked them out and had no resources for them and had no conversations to help understand them, what we really said was, something's wrong with you, and you don't get to be a part of this. It's so important for us to ask questions. It's so important for us to make sure that when we show up to work every day, when we show up for these individuals every day, that we do our best to remove ourselves from trying to put our reality and make it somebody else's. The number one thing that we can do, especially for young people, is to curiously ask them questions. What's that like? How did this happen? What did that feel like? Is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything I can do for you is a question I didn't know until I was a senior in high school. I was a senior in high school and I was in ceramics class. Mr. Fielding, I wrote about him in my book. I found it to be profound because I'd never had a person actually ask me this question. But I threw clay every single day in this guy's class. I was so bored. I was terrible in a classroom to begin with, and then I was bored and there was clay, put it in my hands, and I'm going to throw it. So I would throw clay every single day in this guy's classroom. And finally he sits me down and he says, Hoffman, what do I need to do for you to get you to stop throwing clay? What do I need to do for you to get you to stop throwing clay? What he wanted to know was, how can I be of service to you to change the behavior? Not, dude, you need to stop throwing clay. Like, I know I'm not supposed to be stopping throwing clay. I know that I'm not supposed to do it, but I'm bored. What can I do for you? I said, well, all of those wheels back there fielding, that's what I want to do. Like building stuff with my hands is so boring. I want to sit down on that wheel. I want to center a pot, a mold of clay, and I want to throw a pot so I can take it home to my mom. And he's like, if I put you on that wheel, you'll stop throwing clay. I said, yeah, bro, I promise. Now, the other classmates may not have liked it because we weren't in ceramics too. We weren't in an advanced ceramics class. But Fielding's curiosity about how he could be of service to me to possibly change or correct the behavior was what allowed me to share my experience with him, to be heard in that moment, that if you provide this opportunity for me, I think this may serve me better. Never threw clay again. It was simple. All I needed to do was be put in a position where I could see and do life the way I was creating it in my own mind. It's why when people come to my treatment center, even today as adults, when we have people that say, I already know all these groups. I've done this 20 times. I've been to 15 treatment centers. Well, you know what we do? We'd say, great. What are you going to do how are you going to run group tomorrow? How about we let you run group? You have to study though, and you have to put all your notes together, and we will let you run group. Because maybe this individual needs a position of leadership so we can change that feeling within themselves that starts to alter the belief system. This is exactly why I started my nonprofit the way I started it, the Free Will Project. It was an action sports-based prevention program, and we used no statistics. I wasn't trying to scare kids into anything. See, what I believed was exactly what Dr. Judith from Bucknell University said was kids are feeling the world. They're not logically thinking about it. So what I wanted to do was create an experience that had a community. And inside that experience, what they were feeling was, I can, I will, and I'm able. Because if I wanted them to stay away from substances and not get involved in gangs, what I had to do was make them feel that they were more powerful, more important, that what they were feeling within this community, this activity, and this experience was greater than something else could provide for them. Because if they were running at a lower brain frequency and they found a substance and it tricked their brain into believing that they were doing better, it would be hard to take them from that experience. So what I had to do, or what I thought I needed to do, was bring action sports into schools. One of the things that I've been telling people that need to be in every school, not action sports actually, it's studios. Studios to create music. I've only seen it in 2 places in 15 years of being a speaker. I've seen one in Connecticut, and they said it's so packed they can't even let all the kids in. And I've seen one in Miami-Dade County. And the reason that they can't hold all of the kids is because the #1 genre in the entire world of 7 billion people is hip hop music. Kids want to make beats. They want to make rap music. They want to dances and do music videos to rap music. And it's a way for us to create a community. It's a way for us to spark conversation, to give people leadership roles, to make the beats, to promote it on TikTok, to promote it on Facebook, to promote it on Instagram, to have a role in this process in which they're engaging in something that they actually enjoy that's relative to where they are in their lives. And the reason that I felt that is so important is because, since I graduated high school in 2002, there is still band programs that have saxophones, that have trumpets. I don't even know anybody that plays those instruments. But I can literally sit outside on the street corner right now, and as every car stops, I can listen to somebody listening to rap music extremely loud. And yet we don't see that this is a way to engage youth. It's no different than when I go to schools and I say, why do you still have a pen and paper and let kids run around with a digital camera and call it journalism, and yet you deny every kid the ability to use TikTok on their phone, and you do not have a TikTok journalism program? You wonder why nobody engages with your social media and the kids don't follow you, because you're just still posting a picture. You're missing an opportunity to create a community that has a relative experience for young people in which they get to feel I can, I will, and I'm able. It is the most important piece for us as leaders for youth, is to create things that alter the belief systems through an experience that they get to feel. And when they're experiencing this activity, we build in the skills that they need to be proficient at life. So what did we do at my nonprofit? Well, you didn't get to ride a bicycle until you went through school. You had to be at school. When you came to school, we tutored you. After we tutored you, we put you through a banking program. And that banking program paid you for every day that you came to my program. And then the bank taught you how to spend, save, and share. What I wanted kids to feel was dignified in the work that they do, and realize that when you show up and you perform, you get paid for it. And at the end of my program, I'm not actually going to give you anything. That $500 bike, those backpacks, the sunglasses, the t-shirts that all these companies that sponsored us to give you, I'm not actually giving it to you. You're buying it from me. And you're buying it from me through your effort and showing up and participating in the program. And when you actually receive that bicycle with that big check that we give you, what you experience is you can, you will, and you're able. I had a kid that had a 0.7 GPA. And every single one of us know that you have to try to get a 0.7 GPA. Because if you literally just put on your PE clothes, you pass. I sat down with this brainy kid who had been one of the, he had struggled one of the most in the school. The principal couldn't believe that he even actually got involved in my program. And I sat him down and I said, dude, you got a 0.7 GPA. You have to try to get this. And I was like, would you be willing to let me help you change some of your grades around? Because we got to pick this up. Now, I thought that the idea of engaging this young person in school would be absolutely met with resistance. And I understood that, because that's what we wanted with action sports. Action sports was attracting kids who didn't care about school. I don't know why, but BMXers and skateboarders and motocross people, they don't like classrooms. So when I thought, let me help you with your school, this young kid was like, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. What he actually said was, okay. And I was like taken back. Now I said, okay, well, let's start with one class, because it looks like we got to work on them all, but let's just pick one for now. And I said, which one would you like to start with? And he said, English. I said, all right, let's get your English grade up. 6 months later, when he finished his 7th grade year, he had a 2.8 GPA. The following year, he had a 4.0. He is now 20 years old. He is still a part of my life. I still mentor this young man. He has a baby daughter that he just brought into the world at the beginning of this year. He has a job. He's going to be marrying this woman who brought his child into the world, and has mentioned to me many times how much that experience that he had on this bike at our program is something that he'll never forget. We did this thing where a grant was awarded to us, and afterwards, many of you know, they want these ceremonies and stuff, and they started videoing our kids, and they used Branny. And I, me being an action sports guy, there's probably way too much freedom in some of the ways I do things. And so we got these kids in a van and we take them down to this office space, and they're like, what are we supposed to say, Hoff? And I'm like, just say whatever you want. Just go up there and have fun. And they asked Branny when he went up there, they said, so we heard that you've had a really good increase in your GPA with your academics. And they said, it's probably because they helped you do your homework, right? And that was not his answer. His answer was not yes. His answer was actually no. And the guy looks at him a little confused, and he says, well, what was it? And he said, they actually care. That's it, folks. All we got to do is care. I always tell people, if you don't care, go find something else to do. If that hurts somebody's feelings, I apologize. But in this field, if you don't care, go do something else. Because these individuals that we're working with need people that are going to show up every single day, regardless of what's happening in our life, and give them 150% effort to try and shatter a belief system that says you can't, you won't, and you're not able, and turn it into you can, you will, and you are able. At 12 years old, I accepted that I can't, I won't, and I'm not able. I never sat down and even had a conversation with my father. One of the skills and parameters for skills that I didn't have at this time in my life was the ability to communicate. If there's one thing that I think that we can do for all individuals besides create safe spaces is teach them how to communicate about their experience, because I didn't know how to do that. My therapist, the first time I ever sat down with her, she said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Good." And she said, "Well, good's not a feeling." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, I want to know how you feel. I don't want to know what mood you're in." And I was so confused. I felt like I was looking at a chessboard for the very first time and somebody said, "Move the pieces," without me knowing how to move the pieces. It took years for me to learn how to sit down and tell somebody my experience. I never had this at home. So I couldn't say, "Dad, I feel like you don't love me. That's why you're not coming to my basketball games." I couldn't say, "Dad, I feel like I'm not good enough, and that's why you're not coming to my basketball games." Because if I did, my father then would have turned around and gave me his experience. "Son, I work 14-hour days. You haven't noticed you're the only kid out here with the Jordan Concord 11s on? Son, you haven't noticed you're the only kid on the baseball team with a leather baseball bag and $1,000 worth of new equipment? You haven't noticed you're the only kid with this Adidas soccer cleats on that cost me $200? Son, I work 14-hour days and sacrifice fun that I could be having in my life to provide for you and your brother so you could have all the opportunities that me and your mother never got." And I could have instantly turned around, understood my father's experience and that it had nothing to do with me being not good enough for him loving me. And then I could have said, "Dad, I could cook dudes in filas, but I don't feel like I could do anything if I don't watch you come through those doors." And many of the individuals that we are working with are not seeing their heroes walk through those doors, which means somebody in here has to step up and be that hero. Somebody has to step up and make them feel you can, you will, and you're able. Because once that belief system becomes concrete, they have to go into the world and confirm it through their behavior. And the only way that we're going to get a shift is through patience and persistence over time, because change in a person's life doesn't happen in 1 minute. It doesn't happen in 1 hour. That's why I get so frustrated with insurance companies that want to give us, in North Carolina, they'll give us 4 days of treatment now for a person that comes in with fentanyl addiction. 4 days is what the insurance company says is we should be able to change a person's life. The reality is it takes years. The reality is some of us are laying the groundwork in a 13-year-old's life that's not going to come to fruition until they're 25. It takes time and persistence, but we have to show up and we have to make people feel like they care. I had no idea that the reality I thought I was living was not actually the reality that I was in. The basketball season ended, and shortly after that, I was kicked out of 7th grade for selling a girl weed. I was not receiving validation at home, and so I came to school and I was more impulsive in the decisions that I was making to try and receive validation through my peers. So when a girl said, "Hey, can you get me some weed? I'm looking for some weed." I said, "Yeah, I know this guy in my guitar class. He's always talking about smoking weed." Hit him up, got the weed from him, sold it to the girl. When she got caught with it, I got kicked out of 7th grade for selling her weed. I went from being the best athlete in my town to the drug dealer in the matter of a second. And I found a BMX bike shortly after this, which became a blessing in disguise. My brother was already racing at this time, and my family says, "You got to go out to the BMX track with your brother." So that's what I did. At 12 years old, I started racing BMX. By the time I was 18, I was on the cover of the largest BMX racing magazine in the world. I was ranked #1 in the country for points. I was sponsored by Fox Racing, Airwalk shoes, Spy sunglasses. Companies that didn't sponsor amateur athletes were sponsoring me because they believed when I turned pro, I was going to be one of the best in the sport. And most people would have said, "Don't worry about Hoff. He's going to go off, race BMX, and be super successful." They had no idea. When I took my helmet off, I wanted to kill myself. When I took my helmet off, I was struggling with my anxiety. When I took my helmet off, my depression issues were so bad my senior year, I had Saturday school every single weekend. If I brought my English teacher in here right now, I know her well enough, Miss Letterrock, and I said, can you tell these individuals why you believe I was late to your class every single day, first period English, or I didn't show up?" He would say, "Because he's a punk." And I know this because she wrote me referrals for days that I was cleared to go race BMX. He had referrals pre-written for me. And the second I didn't show up, she was sending them off to the office. But she had no idea. The first drug that I ever took that made me feel a little bit better was sleep. If I was asleep, I couldn't think about killing myself. If I was asleep, I couldn't feel anxiety. If I was asleep, I didn't feel the weight of depression. When I was a young person, I thought my goal in life was to stop myself from feeling uncomfortable. And because my parents were workaholics, I didn't have them there to create the parameters in my life to help me navigate the unseen world. And so I had to learn how to create the parameters myself, just like a young person who's trying to get to a place of relief from the trauma that they're experiencing in their house. Then I found out that my goal is not to stop myself from feeling, it's to learn to understand what it is that I feel, where that feeling may be coming from, and then develop positive coping skills, life skills that could help me manage this unseen world and get me from a place of self-limitation to self-empowerment. It's why I encourage us to continue to think about how we can create communities and experiences for young people, because it's the life skills that we provide while they're enjoying some type of experience that is actually going to be concrete in their mind. I don't know if it's going to show up the first day we do it or 10 years later, but the stuff that Coach Ford was teaching me when I was in 6th grade, jumping rope every single day for 10 minutes before basketball, which I thought was the stupidest thing ever. What does that have to do with any part of life? It's not nothing to do with playing basketball. Really, what he was trying to teach us was how to be disciplined in things we didn't want to do. So when we got to do the things we did want to do, we knew how to give it 150% effort. No different than when you came to the Free Will Project, you didn't get to just ride your bike. You first had to do something you didn't want to do, your schoolwork, because learning how to be disciplined was a life skill that we could give you. And in this experience, we'll also offer you an opportunity to be vulnerable about what it's like to live your life and have your experiences as a young person. Nobody knew on the inside that what I was doing was trying to escape the misery that I started feeling around the time that middle school started. I also thought that life was about making money when I was 18, like a lot of other individuals. And I put my gift away, which was racing my bicycle, because there's no money in it. You make $10,000 to $15,000 a year racing a BMX bike if you're one of the best in the world. You make more money flipping burgers at McDonald's than you do racing a BMX bike. And because I thought life was all about making money, I changed directions. What I was doing this time was, with my social anxiety, learning how to build corporate computer networks. I was offered a job my senior year in 2002 to make $120,000 a year to go work for a guy that was Entrepreneur of the Year of California at 23 years old, known for starting $1 million tech companies. When I knew that I was going to get this job, I put my gift away. When I put my gift away, which was a connection to a community of individuals that were like-minded, focused on empowerment of self and others, the only thing I had was myself. I can't, I won't, and I'll never be able. There's two things that every person needs in this world, especially young people: a safe space to have a conversation. That's a place that they can conversate about anything, and on the other side of that conversation, not feel shame or guilt. And the second thing that they need and we need is a connection to a community of like-minded individuals that are focused on empowerment of self and others. Those two things will alleviate the stress of mental health, and they will change an individual's belief system from I can't, I won't, and I'll never be able to I can, I will, and I am able. At 18 years old, I had to find a new community. A lot of kids started partying when I was a senior. I started going to parties. I'd see people smoke weed and drink. I told myself, I don't need to smoke weed. I don't need to drink. I'm going to go make 6 figures down in San Diego. But the more I went to parties, the more I wondered. The more I went to parties, the more I hated who I was. And the reason I hated who I was is because when the lights turned on, they tapped the keg and the music went up. I wasn't doing keg stands with the guys. I wasn't dancing with the girls. I had social anxiety. I stood against the wall and I watched other people look like they were having a good time. And then I learned how to smoke cigarettes. And the only reason I smoked cigarettes is because that was my way of isolating. What people didn't know was the reason I was always out front smoking cigarettes or out back was because as long as I had a cigarette fired up, I couldn't be inside around people. It had nothing to do with me actually enjoying the cigarette. It was a way for me to isolate. I tried smoking weed shortly after this. Couldn't stop laughing the first time I smoked, thought I was having a good time. I told myself, I don't want to smoke weed every single day, just like my friends do. Maybe I'll just smoke once a month. The next weekend comes by, we're at a party in the orchards. My friends circled up, they started smoking. They said, Hop, you want to smoke? I said, yeah, I'll smoke. but I don't want to smoke weed every single day like my friends do. Maybe I'll just smoke on the weekends. Wednesday comes by, we're on the Xbox at my buddy Tone's house. My friends start smoking. They say, Hop, you want to smoke? I said, yeah, I'll smoke. Next thing you know, I'm smoking weed every single day, just like my friends do. What we didn't understand at that time was there was a doorway that existed. And this door is invisible. But what I've learned is when you walk through this door and you step all the way in, you don't get to just turn around and walk back out because you think you're done. Not the way it works. I've been sober for 16 years. I'll be sober for 17 years from everything. My recovery has been abstinence-based. 16 years, almost 17 years now, including nicotine products. I've only seen people walk into this door and get out two different ways. One is the way 16 kids I went to school with, 17 people I know. 16 kids I know went through the door that I went to high school with and left in caskets. Unfortunately, my generation was at the beginning of the OxyContin era. And I came from a part of town that was under the idea that the only drugs that could cause harm were the ones that the DARE program told us. The orange bottle was new and it was elusive. We thought because it was prescribed by a doctor and picked up at a pharmacy that it was safe. Unfortunately, all of us found out that sometimes the stuff that comes out of the orange bottle is no different than the stuff that comes from the cartel. It was just packaged different. And we thought it was safe. Every one of us became pharmaceutical grade heroin addicts. And then many of us in here know that opioid addiction is not like any other type of addiction. It is extremely difficult to escape the grips, which is why it's been very difficult for individuals to do the one thing that needs to be done to get outside of the door with your life. And that has changed 6 things: the way you think, the way you talk, the way you walk, the places you go, the friends you have, and the things you do. Every single one of us in here as leaders for youth are trying to change those 6 things in the young people's lives that we are working with. I cannot stress enough, if they're not learning how to do this, engaging in some type of activity with a community of people in something they actually enjoy, the only thing that we're going to be doing is making them feel more broken, unheard, and that all we're trying to do is tell them how to live their life. We have to package this in a way where kids don't even realize that they're learning these skills. They don't even realize that they're changing their friends and that we're bringing them different ways of thinking that take them outside of the realm of thinking that they have that's negative or self-limiting. They have no idea that what we're doing is trying to keep them from a destructive environment and keep them in the studios that we create, keep them in the after-school programs that we create, because the more they're around us, the more they feel love. The more they feel loved, the more they feel connected. The more connected they feel, the more hope they have. And the more hope they have, the more their behavior changes from self-limitation to self-empowerment. And the more that they can do that, the more they're influencing the ones that are back in their community or with them, that you can follow my footsteps and there's a different way of doing things. And once we do that, we're creating change. At 18 years old, I started using OxyContin because for the first time in my life, with the snap of a finger, my anxiety went away, my suicidal ideation stopped, and my depression was lifted. And I thought to myself, I'm fixed. You mean to tell me all I had to do was take half of this green pill and I'm fixed? Why don't the doctors just give me this? I didn't want Zyprexa. I didn't want Zoloft, Paxil, Prozac, lithium. I had a guy sit down with me for 15 minutes, a psychiatrist, looked at me and my mother and my father and said, your son's bipolar 2. He needs to take this drug called Zyprexa. I would literally drool. He wanted me to take Seroquel in the morning. I couldn't even get out of bed. I was like drooling. And I'm like, yo, I don't have a soul when you put me on this. Why am this cannot be the way I'm supposed to live. I know I'm broken at this time is how I'm feeling, but this is not the way I'm supposed to feel. OxyContin was the exact opposite. Instantly, I had energy. I had no care in the world. I didn't want to hurt myself. And I thought I could just do this. Since the doctors won't give me this, I can basically do it for myself and I can be like everybody else gets to be. It's so interesting because somebody I once dated said, I used OxyContin one time. And she said, I never did it again after the first time. I said, why was that? She said, because I felt so out of control. and I don't like feeling out of control. And I said, oh, what if I told you this? The way you feel when you're when you took that Oxycontin is the way I feel sober. And the way you feel when you're sober is how I feel when I'm on Oxycontin. We both want the same thing. I just thought that the only way I could achieve it was by having to take something, because I wasn't as lucky as you get to be and not having to take something. The interesting thing is, this is years of meditation and therapy work that's gotten me to these deep subconscious conversations that I've had with myself and what was actually happening. The young individuals that we're working with do not have the prefrontal cortex and ability to logically understand these processes, which is why feeling is so important for everything that we do, because every decision they make is based on a feeling, and most of them have no idea what those feelings are, how those feelings are actually controlling the decisions that they make. At 21 years old, 3 years after my first Oxycontin, I made the worst decision of my life. I found out that opioid addiction not only changes your mental, but it changes the physical, because when you can't get it, you go through the withdrawals. At 21 years old, I armed myself with a gun, and I went inside a house and I robbed a family at gunpoint for the Oxycontin that was inside the house. And that family was one of our best friend's mothers. He had multiple sclerosis and was getting prescribed these Oxycontins, and he was stealing them from his mom originally and selling them to us, not realizing that what he was selling us was pharmaceutical grade heroin. When she eventually caught him stealing these pills, she locked him up. When she locked him up, we couldn't get the pills. And just like you see on all the documentaries, when you couldn't get the pills, whether it was through the pharmacy or through the dealer, you went through the withdrawals. And the withdrawals were so painful. It was like the worst flu times 100. I tell people I had the Delta variant of COVID, which put me in bed for like 14 days. I was so sick. I thought I was going to really be in big trouble. I would prefer that every 4 months over having to deal with another day of withdrawing from an opioid. The pain from that COVID was nothing in comparison to an opioid withdrawal, which is exactly why I became willing to put a gun in my hand and go inside one of my best friend's mother's houses and rob her at gunpoint for her prescriptions. I knew when I left that house that I would never do something like that ever again, because of the shame and guilt that I felt when I left. My co-defendants couldn't say the same thing. They kept robbing people. One of them died at 28 years old, and the other one has been all over the national TV. He was a kid that was arrested. Well, he's not a kid anymore, but 38 years old. He was arrested 20 times in 30 days in California this year. Over the next course of 2.5 years, I wanted to stop, but I didn't know how to stop. At this time, we didn't have conferences like this with individuals that came together with very progressive ideas and understood that individuals like myself needed support early on. There was no infrastructure for rehabs to just go check into a rehab. Google didn't even exist the way it does now, where you could just Google a treatment center and surrender your life and go learn how to change those 6 things. I wanted to get off the ride. I just didn't know how to stop it. And I started using needles. And when I started using needles, the kids I went to school with didn't want to be around me anymore, for obvious reasons. I had one friend at the bottom, and it was my best friend, Nate. He always gave me a place to stay and food to eat. I remember I called him one night and I said, hey, can I come by? He said, yeah, come by. I walked to his house. I get to his house. I knock on the door. I knock on the door. His dad answers. He says, mijo, you can't stay here anymore. I said, what do you mean, Alex? He said, mijo, somebody called me and told me you're stealing credit cards. You need to get your life together. I said, Alex, I'm not stealing credit cards. I really wasn't. I said, can I talk to Nate? He said, yeah, Nate's in his room. I went into Nate's room. I said, hey, bro, I need a sleeping bag. He said, why, Hoff? I said, I'm sleeping on the street tonight, bro. He said, Hoff, call somebody. Get your phone out and call somebody. I said, bro, I've been calling people all night, man. Please just give me a sleeping bag. I got a prepaid phone. I'm going to run out of minutes. Nobody's answering the phone for me. I said, fine, Hoff, I'll give you a sleeping bag. I'm about to go sleep at Clovis High School. The high school I graduated from in 2002. I'm going to sleep in the baseball stadium under the announcer's tower because it was raining and I needed a place to stay dry. Remember, I walked out of Nate's house and I had the sleeping bag in my hand. I went down the driveway. I hung a left towards the high school. He lived about 150 yards from the tennis courts. I get below the street light outside his house and I hear his voice. He says, Hoff. I turned around and I looked at him. I said, yeah. He said, look at yourself, bro. What are you doing? I said, don't worry about it, Nate. I got it. We all say, don't worry about it. We got it. We'll stop, get jobs, get married, go to college. Nate's been dead for 15 years. 16 years in March. He's one of the 16. Not what he wanted either. I wrote this guy a letter every single day for 11 months when I was in prison. I didn't even know if he was reading my letters. I didn't care. I was just trying to inspire him. And I got one letter from him. And I remember I was so excited. I unwrapped this envelope. I was sitting down on my bunk with my feet hanging off the side. And I undo this envelope and this letter, and I started reading it. And it said, Hoff, I read all your letters. You've been inspiring me. I'm going to change my life and I'm going to follow your footsteps. Said, so I checked into rehab, but I got to wait 2 more weeks for a bed space to open up. In the time that I got that letter and the time that Nathan told 2 more weeks, and you can follow Hoff's footsteps and change your life like he's doing, Nathan's dad walked into his room and he found him dead on the floor. And what I tell people is that he was just a victim of the infrastructure at that time. Today, we have a more supportive infrastructure that still needs to improve. But today, we have individuals here. I can see 108 screens that are here today, part of an infrastructure that most likely didn't exist as robustly as it does today, back when Nathan died. We have the ability today to intercept and intercede on individuals' lives that are heading towards the direction that many of my friends have gone down. We understand trauma. We understand the ACEs. We understand that behavior is not because they're bad people. It's because of their experiences, their environment, and how they're psychologically processing what is happening in those areas. And that we have to show up empathetically, consistently, no matter what, for these individuals to help change the path that they're on. For the next 6 months, I slept on the street, behind dumpsters so people couldn't find me, in dirt fields so people couldn't find me. If I was lucky, I would got a Motel 6. If I was luckier, I got somebody's couch or somebody's floor to sleep on. The only reason I would get that is if I had money and drugs on me at that time. And I tell people I've never felt so ashamed of myself, so alone, so trapped, misunderstood, hopeless. Everything that I hated feeling when I was a young kid was now magnified by the addiction that had just taken over my life and hijacked everything that I ever wanted from life. I honestly thought that you're going to die soon. On January 21st, 2007, I had a spiritual experience. It's the only reason I'm alive doing what I'm doing today. That night, I broke into a house that was up for rent. On January 22nd, I woke up at 2 p.m. with 4 cops in the rooms. They had their guns drawn on me and they arrested me. 30 days later, they sentenced me to 4.5 years for the armed robbery that I committed in 2004. I remember when I got to Wasco State Prison, I was on D yard, cell 254. I had the top bunk. I walked into the cell block about 10:30 at night, went up the metal staircase, cut across the tier, opened up cell 254, shut the door behind me. I met this guy they called Dizzy. He was an Antelope Valley skinhead. First time I'd ever met a skinhead in my life, and I can't say I ever want to be around one ever again. Because the next 30 days, I had to listen to this guy's stuff and ask myself, you can't honestly believe all this stuff that you're talking about right now. But before I jumped up on my bunk, I made my bed. I made my bed, then jumped up on my bunk. I laid down on this mattress and I was looking up at the ceiling. At 11 p.m., they flipped the lights off in the California penitentiary. And I had a moment to read this quote that somebody had written in the ceiling with a pencil. It said, be careful what you think, because your thoughts become your words. Be careful what you say, because your words become your actions. Be careful what you do, because your actions become your habits. Be careful what you make a habit, because your habits become your character. And your character becomes your destiny. I kept reading it over and over and over. It made so much sense to me. I thought to myself, if this is the blueprint of how I got here, well, then I could use this quote to completely re-engineer my life, get out of here a different person and get different results. So I set 4 goals. I said, when I get out of here, I'm going to race BMX professionally. When I get out of here, I'm going to go to the Olympics. When I get out of here, I'm going to start a nonprofit organization for kids. And when I get out of here, I'm going to become a professional speaker. But I didn't know how I was going to go from a prison cell to the Olympics, because at that time, no human being ever started in a prison cell and made it to the Olympics. But I read in this really big book, those that can be trusted with little will be trusted with much. And what I thought to myself was, I can't even brush my teeth every single day at 23 years old. And if I can't brush my teeth every single day, how could I ever make it to a place like the Olympics? Then I started to realize that what I needed in that moment was not to focus on the big things in my life, but focus on all the little things. What we're trying to do with young individuals is get them to see, don't worry about the big things, focus on the little things. Don't worry about all of your classes right now, Brainy. Let's just focus on one, because what I want you to feel is what it's like to win in the execution of a small thing repeatedly over time. And then after you see that you can do that, then we adopt the new thing that you're going to add to the program. And you start to see that you're capable, that you will, and you're able, that you can, you will, and you're able. So I started brushing my teeth every single day, not to stop cavities, to go to the Olympics. Then I learned how to make my bed. Then after I learned how to make my bed, I learned how to organize my stuff. Believe it or not, my closet is a representation of this skill I started learning when I was in prison. After I learned how to organize all my stuff, I learned how to be disciplined. My ability to do good work when I didn't want to do good work at all. And what I tell people is discipline for me is this experience. We all know what it's like when we go up to the freezer to get some ice, and some ice falls out of the freezer and hits the ground. We all will stand over it and look at it. And we know exactly what we're supposed to do. Get down, pick it up, put it in the sink. And yet sometimes we just look at it and go, kick it under the fridge. Discipline to me is this idea that every single one of us have the ability to choose to take a shortcut or to do the one thing that we know we're supposed to do. No person in this world is born with discipline. Many of the individuals that we're working with are born with artistic abilities, with music, photography, videography, English, mathematics. Some of the kids that the schools think are stupid are actually brilliant minds with mathematics. We've just never tapped into it. And I know that to be the case because I met a girl years ago, Carissa Phelps, who was sex trafficked in her early teens, was homeless by the time she was 13, went to jail, and it was a guard that made her realize she was good at school and graduated with a law degree from UCLA. He was born with that gift. People are born with athletic gifts. Nobody is born with discipline. Everybody stands over the ice cube and has two options: pick it up and put it in the sink, or kick it under the fridge because nobody will see it. What I've learned is discipline's a muscle. What I've learned is that Coach Ford was teaching me how to be disciplined with that jump rope, so that when the seed that he planted popped up out of the ground when it was time, I stopped kicking the ice cube under the fridge. My mind still, after 16 years of trying to be the best version of myself, says kick it under the fridge. But immediately now, because I've trained my discipline muscle, I will get down, pick it up, and put it in the sink. Our job with young people is not only to help them navigate the unseen world, but it's to help them navigate the seen world through life skills. It's not how we teach them, it's what we teach them. And sometimes we're teaching them without actually saying that we're teaching them. The activities and the things that we are getting them to do is developing the life skill that they're going to need to survive in this world. Then the day came where I met the greatest mentor of my life, Kobe Wade. I had a foundation of how I was living my life in prison and doing my time, but there were other things that I needed, and that was the character of who I was going to become that you're sitting and listening talk to today. I got transferred to Avenel State Prison. It was prison of prisons, and that means everybody's shooting dope, everybody's smoking meth, smoking weed, drinking alcohol, and the cops are sitting there watching it all happen, and nobody's doing anything about it. There's 1,600 inmates on the yard, and instinctually, I want to do what every one of those inmates are doing. But there was an African-American gentleman that would sit down below the TV every single morning and had his headphones on. He was reading this really big book that I was interested in. And he was always dancing and laughing and singing to himself. And I thought to myself, there's 1,600 inmates in this yard, and this one man is the only one that's doing anything different. And I want to do what the 1,600 inmates are doing. And I recognize that I think my instinct is self-destructive. So I want to do the opposite of that. So I think I'm going to go up to this guy that the people I'm in prison with say I'm not supposed to talk to because of our skin color. And I'm not going to listen to them. I'm just going to go up and talk to him anyway. So I started asking him questions about this really big book he was reading, and he'd give me the answers. And then finally, after a while, I said, hey, do you think I could study with you? And he said, no. And I said, what? Why? He says, I study alone, youngster. I said, okay. Well, you give me the answers, so I'll just keep doing that. That's sufficient enough for me. So I persistently kept asking him questions. And then finally one morning, finally one mid-morning, after my mid-morning nap, somebody knocks on my bunk. I open my eyes, and it's Toby Wade. I said, what's up? He said, get off your bunk. I said, why? He says, we're going to study. I said, really? He says, yeah, but listen, youngster, we're not going to do this your way. You have to do it my way. That means you show up every day, you're on time, and we do it exactly the way I say to do it, line upon line, precept upon precept. If you can do that, you can study with me. You understand? And I said, yeah. He said, let's go. We're starting right now. For the next 13 months, Toby Wade sat down with me for a minimum of 6 hours a day. For 6 hours a day. I looked at this man's eyes sometimes because we would study in the morning, we would study in the afternoon, and we would study at night. And there were many times I looked, especially at night, when he was defeated, when he was tired, when he was overwhelmed, and I could see that he wanted to take a day off. I could see that he didn't want to show up for me because he was having trouble just showing up for himself in that moment. Toby Wade was serving a life sentence for murder at this time and was in and out of the courts. He had to sit before these people that would tell him after 15 years of being a changed man with no write-ups, one of the only lifers in the California penitentiary that had no write-ups, that he did not deserve to leave yet. And he would come back, and I could see the defeat in his eyes. But you know what he never did? He never let me see somebody take a day off from me. He was so selfless in his servitude, and that he could see that I was going to be getting out soon, and that what I needed in that moment was, regardless of how he felt and what he was experiencing, that I needed to see leadership in its truest form. Somebody that showed up every day and exercised faith. Somebody that could give to me with no expectation of anything return. Somebody that could show me what it was like to be personally responsible for all matters, including the ones that had nothing to do with us. Because if we show personal responsibility in all matters, we're only trying to find a solution for everything that comes in our direction. What I tell people is, for the first time in my life at 24 years old, I met my father. He looked nothing like me. I met the man that showed up for me every single day and showed me how to be a man, that showed me how to win, that showed me how to lose, that showed me how to have resilience, that showed me how to have character, somebody that people could depend on. If my mother and father were in here today, they would tell you just how much this man means to our entire family and how he is just as much my dad as my father is. Because my father doesn't look at everything that I talk about now and blame himself. My father was doing the best that he could. I don't blame my dad either. We look back on it now and see that things could have been different. They could have been better. But today we focus on the gratitude of me being here today, and that there was a place and time in my life where I was able to meet a man named Toby Wade. And his story is one of the most important pieces of my story today, because every single one of you that are listening to me right now are a Toby Wade in somebody's life. And they're depending on us. They're depending on the work that we do for them every single day. Toby got out of prison after 21 years. People told him he was never getting out. And I listened to this man exercise faith. He used to tell me, Hoff, I'm getting out of here. The work that I'm doing today is to connect me to the moment that I know is coming. I just don't know when. On December 13th, 2008, I paroled. December 15th, I met my parole agent. He says, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to race my bike professionally. Here's the cover of the magazine that I was on. I promise you, Mason, I can ride a bicycle. I said, I've been training for the Olympics for the last 2 years while I've been in prison. I said, at some point, I'd like to start a program for kids and tell my story as a speaker. He looked at me a little confused and he said, who brought you here? And I said, my mom did. He said, go get her. I said, do you want me to go out there and get my mom and bring her in here? He said, yeah. My poor mom, she met all my principals, all my teachers, and now she's got to meet my parole agent. And she comes into the office and he says, "Ma'am, do you know what your son's telling me he's going to do?" And she says, "You're talking about him riding his bicycle?" He says, "Yeah. He says he's going to go to the Olympics. And he wants to start a nonprofit for kids at some point and tell his story as a speaker." My mom says, "That's right. He's been talking about this for the last 2 years that he's been in prison." And he looked at my mom, this is God honest truth, and he said, "Ma'am, your son's full of shit." He said, "I want you to know that I brought you in here so I could tell you to your face, I'm going to rearrest your son in less than 30 days. And I want you to know that it's going to be you and your husband's fault for being stupid enough to believe this story." This is where we really have a lot of work to do. Some of the people that are in control of these young individuals that we're trying to save have not understood how important communication is. Really, what he was trying to say was, I have never seen an inmate get out of prison and have these type of goals, let alone accomplish them, which scares me. It scares me because I recognize that the feelings of failure, the feelings of defeat, or the feelings of things not working out the way the expectations of this individual has may lead him back to his old behaviors. And because of that, I'm scared that I'm going to have to rearrest him soon if things don't actually work out. So how can I support you, Ms. Hoffman, and Tony, and your vision to make sure that you are continuing on a pathway that's self-empowering? Instead, he chose to speak from a place of fear. He spoke from a place of experience that didn't mean that that experience of 93% recidivism rate in California was actually going to be me. We have to speak from a place of empathy and understanding because conversation matters. Fortunately for myself, I'm stubborn as it gets. I walked out of there thinking to myself, well, he's about to watch one of the greatest comebacks ever. And 5 months later, I raced my first professional BMX race I'd ever raced in my life. I took third place. That first year, I won 5 races at the lower pro division. 1 year after being back on my bicycle, the United States of America invited me to the Olympic Training Center down in Chula Vista, California. I picked up a microphone 1 year after I got out of prison, started telling my story. The second year I was at the Olympic level, I made 6 finals with the top athletes in the world. I was in Orlando, Florida, and I thought I was going to get my first top 3. Thought I was going to get my first top 3 with the best athletes in the world, and I was racing neck and neck with this guy, David Herman, who was the top American athlete for the 2012 Olympic Games in London. He made a mistake over a jump at 30 miles an hour, and he bumped into me. When he bumped into me, I put my foot out at 30 miles an hour, and I snapped my ACL, almost shattered my shin, and obliterated both of the shock pads, the meniscuses in my knee, and it ended my racing career. I was so devastated. I was so angry. And this old self, when I was a young kid, popped up. And I started having this conversation of, this is why I don't try. This is why I stopped putting in effort, because every time I put effort into something and I love something wholly, it gets taken from me. That was my old belief system. You can't, you won't, you'll never be able. But I had a safe space to have a conversation now. I had a connection to a community of like-minded individuals that were focused on empowerment of self and empowerment of others. And I could think these negative thoughts, but I could redirect them to what my safe space and my community was telling me. You can, you will, and you're able. You're just going to have to change directions and find out why this happened. I put my faith into play, and 6 months later, I started my nonprofit organization. And 6 months later, I started coaching BMX athletes. I started to take my pain and realize I could always divert it into purpose. By 2016, my nonprofit was raising over $120,000 a year, giving away $40,000 worth of bicycles, $10,000 worth of skateboards. By 2016, I'd coached 2 world champions, 3 national champions, had 25 athletes from Australia to Bolivia. By 2016, I became one of the most requested substance use and mental health speakers in the country. In 2020, when my story went viral, I became one of the biggest motivational speakers in the world. In July of 2016, my top female athlete, Brooke Crane, called me. It says, pack your bags, Hoff. We're going to the Olympics. In 2016, I became the first person who started in a prison cell and participated in the Olympics. And sit tight real quick. I don't get to share this often. So what I have here is framed. Some people have tried to take away what I try to say from prison to the Olympics. And one day we were in Rio and I was at dinner with Brooke and her family and these guys that I didn't know who they were. Well, it turned out they were these bigwigs at the United States Olympic Committee. And after the games, I get this random message on my Instagram from this guy who says, "We had no idea about your story." And he says, we want to mail you something on behalf of the United States. And so what I got was a special token that very few coaches got. It's hanging on Brooke's jersey on the wall. But I got this letter that says, "Dear Tony Hoffman, on behalf of the United States Olympic Committee, we want to thank you for the coaching support you provided in helping Team USA prepare for and compete in the 2016 Olympic and Paralympic Games. By all accounts, Team USA had a tremendously successful games in Rio, yet this success does not happen by accident. It takes years of dedication on the part of the athletes to even be in position to make the team, let alone compete for a medal. It takes a committed and focused effort on the part of many individuals to help the athletes realize and maximize their potential. The contributions and services provided by people like you, working in large part behind the scenes, make sure that Team USA is the best prepared team when it comes to step out and compete on the world stage." Of all the things, this letter is one of the most meaningful things about my journey. I wanted to go to the Olympics as an athlete. And for a long time, I couldn't realize why I needed to be there as a coach. And it made so much sense to me when it finally happened. You know, as an athlete, it's very selfish. Every one of us are in a position as a coach right now that's listening. Athletes are very selfish. It's about accomplishing something for yourself. But as a coach, we give our time, we give our energy, we give parts of ourselves that truly change the trajectory of somebody else's life. If you were to go look up Brooke's story, my mentorship of her as a coach for an athlete is only the surface of what I was actually doing in the freedom of this young person who would finally accept themselves for who they are and tell the world about it. And what has happened in her life the day that she did that, and the freedom that she has come to find. Every one of us in here is an Olympic coach for some kid that has the potential to do something great, who's going to become the next big music producer, that's going to invent some type of engineering or program, who's going to write the most incredibly profound books, who is going to start a business that provides hundreds of thousands of jobs in the United States and changes the world in the way they do something. I don't know what it is, but every single one of us are the facilitators in somebody's future that is going to be greater than this. And that's why we're here, is because we care. And we're here to make a difference. And I'm so grateful to states like the one that you're in, because you're progressive. You guys have tried to come up with new ways in understanding humans and the way that they are and why they do what they do and how we can come together as a community of leaders to make a difference. And when I survived my past, that's what I realized I'm going to do for the rest of my life. It's just try and make a difference in other people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. We do have some questions coming in from the chat. I also have a couple of my own questions to ask you. So we'll start with some of the ones that
you ask them if you don't mind, and then I'll answer them that way. I don't have to read.
Absolutely. That sounds great. So one of the questions is, do you do any mentoring with prisoners?
Yes, I do. I actually work with prisons all over the world. Prisons have used my story as an inspiration and sounding board for inmates all over the world. What I do typically when I work with prisons is Q&A sessions. And so what I try to do is virtual Q&A sessions. They'll either watch my TED Talk or Sanctified, my mini documentary. And then I'll get in a forum like this and they'll ask me questions. And really what I try to do is just provide the insight, right? I have a kid that calls me every single day and I tell him, if you want what I have, all you have to do is learn how to think the way I think. And so when he's calling me, I'm trying to give him access to my thinking. And so when I work with prisons, it's Q&A to try and give them access to how I think and how I've navigated different situations that many of them understand I've been through.
Thanks. The next two questions kind of go together. So does your treatment facility provide services to adolescents, and what states do you serve?
We're in Southern California right now, no adolescents, way too much red tape to start. I don't have a trust fund that did this. I literally spoke for years, saved all my money, and my business partner put himself in way too much debt. That scares me. So we're starting with adults. We're in escrow on a third house, so we'll be 18 beds. I will start an adolescent program, I promise you. Kids are my heart. Right now we're adults. We're going to build out 30 beds in Southern California, and then we'll probably start moseying our way around Georgia, Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, and some of the hotspot states that really could use more support services. And one of those locations, I promise you, will be a youth. I just don't know when.
Thanks. There's a request for you to repeat the quote you read on your cell wall/ceiling.
Sure. It's be careful what you think. Your thoughts become your words. Be careful what you say. Your words become your actions. Be careful what you do. Your actions become your habits. Be careful what you make a habit, because your habits become your character, and your character becomes your destiny. If you wanted, you could reach out to me on social media and I can just text it to you. I'm on Instagram, Tony M. Hoffman.
All right. Next question. Have you worked with any community to help them replicate your freewheel model to align with the needs of their youth?
No, I haven't. And I've made this clear to a lot of communities that I'm willing to share my insight on why I believe the Free Will Project was so successful and how to replicate maybe not the action sports side of it, but the community side of what we were doing in terms of creating that community of an experience to shift belief systems. I'm open to those types of things. I would love to share my ideas. That's really, I don't like to hoard anything. But yeah, absolutely, I'm open to sharing with that. You just got to reach out to me either on social media through my website.
All right. A fun question. What's your connection with the sneakers?
So these, I just got these the other day, but so when you heard me say, when my dad said, you don't know that you're the only kid with the Jordan Concord 11s on, this is actually the shoe that I was wearing in 6th grade. It was not the replica one that we have now in terms of 40 years later, however long it's been. I have always been into sneakers before it became such a worldwide thing with everybody, right? Back then it was kind of reserved for a certain culture and basketball players, and I loved that culture and basketball. And so I've been into sneakers since I was a little kid. So when I started doing well for myself, the one thing that I've done to reward myself and enjoy life is to literally buy sneakers upon sneakers upon sneakers. So yeah, this is what I do with my free time, is buy sneakers and clothes.
And they are well organized.
Yes.
All right. There's a plug that when you look to expand and move around, that Virginia would happily be the place that the adolescent facility opens up in. I can see Mecca up there nodding her head too.
Yeah.
So there's just a plug, no question in there.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the 6 things that need to change?
Yes. The way you think, the way you talk, the way you walk, the places you go, the friends you have, and the things you do. In short, everything.
Yeah. All right. A lot of just thank yous, and I think it resonates with people that adolescent services are really an area of need.
Mm-hmm.
And my questions, I think the story, one of your stories that really resonated with me was your play throwing in high school. And so frequently and so often, parents school systems, even treatment providers and treatment facilities are all based in this, what do you want, youth? You can earn that when we see X, Y, and Z first.
Yeah.
Instead of the opposite, which is what you were afforded in this class, which was go do the thing you said will help you. And I'm not going to ask you to stop throwing the clay, right? You don't have to have 5 days of not throwing clay before I let you use the wheel. You go use the wheel. So it's that reverse of let the youth do it to feel the success, to feel the positive reaction, and to have that internal, I'm able. So what messages do you have for the adults in this room about being a little more flexible with youth, and kind of avoiding that you must earn kind of mentality?
Yeah, for me, and this is a struggle for everybody, including myself, is being so present in the moment that we're able to remove our own biases, right? Is understanding that every single person comes in with some type of biases. That is, the reality we see, the reality we're processing is so much connected to our own experiences and our own way of doing things. For us to actually be present in the moment, we're removing all biases and we're focusing completely on this individual. And that is, what do they need? And when we're in a place of pure empathy in that regard, I think what we end up doing is looking more for solutions, and we ask more questions, and we're more open to the dynamicness of maybe we do something that doesn't feel right in this situation, and we try it to see what the outcome is. And I think my biggest kind of thing I could say is to try things. Don't be afraid to try something, to prove yourself wrong, that maybe what you don't think is going to work may actually work, like saying, hey, go get on the wheel, even though clearly I'm not supposed to be on the wheel. Really what was happening was the reward system in my brain went up because I got to be on the wheel. And then now I was more engaged in the classroom because I was receiving the dopamine hit that I was really looking for, because I already had that low brain frequency. And so I would say continue to do the work on yourself to understand your own biases and your own belief systems, and how we may be trying to transfer that onto somebody else, versus coming in with a more empathetic approach where we're asking questions and trying different things to try and find and see what works.
Thanks. Question in the chat. Do you think it matters how old a substance abuse counselor is if those of us who are well out of our 30s still get it, and that we have the same philosophy that you do?
No, I don't think that age matters. I don't think the soul sees age. I think the soul sees authenticity. And that is, do you really care? The unseen world has an ability to connect. And when you connect there's something different happening. And age doesn't separate that. I think that, like the Homeboys Industry guy, the father from Homeboys Industries, he's older. How did he make a connection with these younger guys that were in prison? There's something at the soul level, the spirit level, that when you show up and you get it, they understand that you get it and you're safe there. That's really the soothing part of a relationship. When we're with a person who understands us, gets us, has compassion, empathy, no judgment or shame in that experience, there's a soothingness that happens. Those people want to be around us. I remember one time I was in Massachusetts and a nurse said, this person comes in every single day. And she's like, they're clearly not going to change. What am I supposed to do? And I was like, treat them like a human being. I was like, if that person comes in every single day and says, is Jennifer here? I said, you won. Because what they're looking for is the soothing comfort that your spirit brings to them, because you're treating them as a human being. They feel like you understand them and you get them. And so your age doesn't matter. It matters whether they understand that you get it and they feel safe and soothed around you. That's the most important. I mean, outside, even if they don't change, is that we treat people like humans.
Question, do you still struggle with social anxiety? And if so, how do you manage it now?
I do. I First time I ever introduced myself to a female in the wild, I was 36 years old. It took me, and the only reason I did it is because my therapist said, enough. Tomorrow, you're going to go and introduce yourself to that girl at the gym, and you're going to ask her if she would join you for coffee. And so I did. Turned out she was a prison guard. And so my story didn't fly well with her, and we didn't get coffee. But I struggle with social anxiety in that environment still. If we were to have a networking mixer and I was supposed to come and hand out business cards and talk about myself, I may find conversation with one or two people, and that's it. And I will make it about you because I don't want to talk about me. And so the most important part of me managing my social anxiety is understanding where it exists, trying to break through some of its limitations by making myself uncomfortable, by having icebreaker conversations. But most importantly for me and my social anxiety is changing the conversation about what it means. It has nothing to do with me being inadequate. It has nothing to do with me being broken. It has nothing to do with me being so different that I can't engage with a community of people that I hate myself for it. One of the things that therapy has really taught me to do is change the narrative about my feelings. And that's really what's been most beneficial for me and my social anxiety, is that I don't hate myself for it anymore. I actually love it to some degree. I just know that I can't be too comfortable with myself. I need to go out and I need to get that spark from community.
Okay. Will you share with us the role your family played along your healing process at any point in time? Did
Yeah.
you feel like they left the picture? Were they a complete part of the healing picture? Talk to us a little bit about
Sure.
that.
In the beginning, there wasn't a lot of information, especially for families out there, right? Like, one of the things I do is tell people, especially families, if you want to really get involved in this, go buy a book called How to Do the Work. And it's by Dr. Nicola Parrott. She's the most followed psychologist in the world. She's absolutely brilliant. Everything that she does is so easy to understand, and it's so practical, right? My parents were told in the meetings of Al-Anon, that was very hardcore Al-Anon back in the day, you need to cut him off, do not talk to him, and let him hit rock bottom. When he hits rock bottom, he'll have an epiphany, he'll change his life, stop doing what he's doing, and then if he has 6 months of sobriety, then you allow him back into your life, which was an absolute mistake. What really should have happened was, you have to protect yourself with safe boundaries. We don't want the SWAT team in your house. We don't want them stealing your stuff. So if you have to remove them, we understand that, but you shouldn't remove communication, because this soul needs to know it's loved by somebody. For a long time, I didn't feel like I was loved by my family. It started when I was 12 and my dad wasn't showing up for me. And then it was repeated when I would call them and they wouldn't answer, or when they did, they would say, Tony, we're not allowed to talk to you until you have 6 months of sobriety. I don't know how to get 6 months of sobriety. Well, when I started changing my life in prison, they weren't too on board with this whole idea that I was going to change, because my addiction had hurt them so much. They came to see me and started to notice that I was making some changes. And I think my father noticed the biggest change was I actually wanted to get on my bike. Because my dad, one time when I was in rehab, that I didn't tell you about, and my story's got so many components, but he's like, why don't you get back on your bike? And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. My dad was a professional motocross racer, and so he's always been connected to action sports. And so when I wanted to get back on my bicycle, I think my dad realized, okay, I think this is my son for sure. And then my dad was like, I'll support you racing. We'll give you a house to stay, so long as you're focused on these things that you're going to say you're going to do. And I will support your racing if that's what this is going to take for you to get your life back on track. And my parents also went on their own healing journey. My father became a very spiritual person, which really helped him change the way he communicated with me. I made a dumb mistake in a relationship back in 2016, and I felt a lot of shame and guilt for it, because it was not within my character really be that way. And I kind of expected my father to put me down. That was kind of the way he did things when we were younger. And my father, though, he had changed the way he supported me. And he said, you know what, son, I have seen you do some amazing things and figure out things. And he was like, and you know what you need to do. and I believe that you'll do the work, and you'll get through the other side of this and everything will be okay. And just having that supportive conversation from my family has shifted dramatically how much I feel about myself, because to hear from my father that he believes in me is not something that I grew up with. I didn't hear my dad say, I love you until I was 24 years old, and it was over a phone in prison. And I think my dad told me because I think he realized if he didn't tell me, he may never get to tell me in person or even over the phone, because I may die from my addiction. But they're amazing. I've been very fortunate.
Appreciate you sharing that. And I think it again speaks to how important all the work that everyone in this room does, because some of those messages that were passed to your family were so unhealthy and not supportive to your path to recovery. So what we say and what we do really matters and impacts an actual life. And so just that reminder is really helpful. There was a request to repeat the author's name of the book that you recommended.
Dr. Nicole Lepera, Lepera. She has a huge partnership with Target. You can go and buy her book at Target, or it's on Amazon like any other books. Barnes and Nobles, I think somebody posted a link. She actually gives me books to give to young people that I go and speak to, because sometimes they're like, hey, how do I do this and how do I do that? Well, I'm leaving communities shortly after I'm in there. And if you guys all know, some communities don't have therapists at their schools. They don't even have therapists in their towns. And so what Dr. Nicole has done is mail me copies of her books. And what I do is mail them to kids and say, you know what, read this. This will help you understand family dynamic. This will help you understand how that dynamic is creating a behavior, and that behavior can be healed through these types of steps in a very practical way. It's great for adults and young people.
So can you tell us about the last meeting with your parole officer?
Yeah, so he actually left shortly after that. I got a message from a Instagram profile with no picture in 2015 or early 16. And it said, Hoffman, this is Mason, call me. And it was his number. And I called him and he said, will you meet me for coffee? And I said, yeah, I'll meet you for coffee. Well, I went in there to this coffee shop, and he said, I left a few months after you had gotten out and Lagone took over my position. And he said, somebody had recently just reached out to me and said, do you remember that Hoffman kid? And they said, go look at his Instagram. And he's like, so I got on your Instagram, and he said, sure shit, Hoffman, you're doing everything you told me that you were going to do. And I said, Mason, I've got this chick, this girl, she's amazing. And I think we're going to make the Olympics this year. And he said, I'm sorry for how I treated you. I just want you to know that I was scared for you. And I want to be here to encourage you today, to keep your faith and to continue on the path that you're on. And I actually got him on, I said, Mason, you owe me. I drove 8 hours to get him on video, say that he told my mom she was full of that I was full of shit with my story. And so if you watch my mini documentary, you get to see Agent Mason on video say exactly what he told my mother. But we are friends now. Last time I heard from him was in 2020. It was Hoffman, this is Mason. Are you alive? Isn't that crazy? So many people were dying during the pandemic that were like me. The only thing he wanted to know was, are you alive still? Have you stayed sober? Because I know that every part of life that you have built was just taken from you, and they're not allowing you to engage in it. And I replied to him, and I never heard back from him, but I let him know I'm alive and starting a treatment center. And so I don't hold grudges against people.
Thanks for sharing that. Mecca was wondering, where is Mr. Toby?
He's in Sacramento, California. He's a Sacramento Kings fan, which has been a good year for him last year. He's flies out to Dallas. I bring him out to Dallas, and I put him up in a nice place. Now he stays at my house. And we watch the Sacramento Kings and the Golden State Warriors play the Dallas Mavericks every year. He just messaged me a couple days ago, and we're still best of friends. He is now, I think, 64 years old, got out, graduated college, got a degree, and he works for the city of Sacramento. And just like Toby Fashion, he sued the city. They wouldn't give him a job. And he deserved that job. And so, you know what? He went after him, and he's paved the way to say, you know what? I know I went to prison for something that most people would agree is a very bad thing. But people can change, and he should not be judged based on his past if he's been out and done everything he needs to do to prove that he's a different person. And he got his job. And so now he's happy working with the city.
People are celebrating that in the chat.
Yeah, he's so awesome. I love that guy.
Yeah. Well, that is all the time we have for questions. I just want to say thank you so much, Tony, for sharing your story with all of us today. Your willingness to communicate your lived experience has the potential to benefit so many others. As I listened to you speak, I was reminded of the inherent power and healing that we each have inside of us when it's given the appropriate environment to grow. And
Right.
that this healing resides in each and every youth and young adult that we're currently working with, and given the guidance, courage, and support from us and other trusted people around them, they can begin to see this and possibly look for other paths to managing and healing from what they have gone through, rather than turning to substances. We know
Amen.
for so many of the youth we work with, substance use is an effort to solve a problem rather than the problem to be solved. And helping these young people begin to find other solutions so often starts with us, the trusted adult, role modeling that vulnerability that you spoke of, expressing to these young people that we're worried, concerned, scared, that we care about them. And when we open the door to vulnerability, we open the door for youth to share more about their internal world and their life experiences, and begin to truly work on the problem or need underneath the substance use. So thank you so much for bringing this message to Virginia.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. If you guys enjoyed my story, follow my journey on Instagram and TikTok, Tony M. Hoffman. Thank you so much for your time and opportunity to share my life story with you all. I hope something sticks with you forever. And best wishes. Enjoy the holidays, and continue to show up for the ones that need us. Thank you all.
Full. Thank you, Elaine. Welcome back after an amazing 2 days at the virtual Adolescent and Young Adult Substance Use Symposium, hosted by the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. I am so pleased that DBHDS Office of Child and Family Services, with the support of Virginia Tech, was able to bring the symposium to all of us. These past couple of mornings have been filled with information, resources, and most importantly, hope for what is to come in Virginia. Society's understanding of substance use and addiction is forever changing and growing as we gather more information and understand the interaction of brain science and the environment. This was once highlighted in a TED Talk by Johann Hari titled, "Everything You Think You Know About Addiction is Wrong." In this talk, he famously states, "The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is human connection." This statement resonates with the message that we hope the Adolescent and Young Adult Substance Use Symposium brought to Virginia. This message is worth reiterating as we end today. We hope you were incredibly inspired by these presentations to go out into your communities and provide that safe, healthy, human connection to every youth and adolescent. Regardless of your title, the position you hold, the degree you have, we all have the possibility of connecting to a young person. A safe, connected adult can be a prevention factor and important to early intervention specific to substance use. When we can approach a child from a place of care, concern, and curiosity, rather than shame, blame, and punitive responses, we truly have the potential to change the trajectory of that youth's life. We can all be part of supporting youth and adolescents in Virginia and walking lives of wellness, recovery, and resilience. We are so happy that you have joined us for this opportunity and look forward to the impact this symposium will have on your work and your community. Thank you for all that you do.